good to see everyone. I believe we have a lot of new people, which I'm super excited about, so thank you guys for joining. We got an interesting series, and maybe that's why a lot of people join, because of the title, Dating, Discerning Marriage. This is a big topic. I have been, speaking, and when I go out and give talks, I'll talk to people about the dating scene in their area or the dating culture, and I'll just be honest, it's a mess. What I'm seeing, what I've experienced myself, it's a mess. And particularly in the Catholic world, people want to date. People have a desire to want to be married and start a family. And the marriage rate in the United States and Canada has declined 50% in the last 70 years. So we're seeing culturally at large, people aren't getting married as much. So we're going to just talk about a little bit in this first session, kind of what is wrong with the dating culture at large. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the virtue of chastity and an intentional dating relationship, some boundaries, and I'll share with you some of my experiences. So let's dive in, because St. Augustine, I love this, he says this quote: "The deepest desire of the human heart is to know another and to be known by another." That's the deepest desire of the human heart. It's to know another and to be known. And right in the beginning, when God created man and woman, the sexual difference reveals this call to Holy Communion. It's not good for Adam to be alone. It was not good for him to be alone. God himself said it. He was made to be a gift and to give himself. He was made to know another and to be known by another. And John Paul II, in his Theology of the Body, says we cannot become fully alive, our true selves, until we make a sincere gift of ourselves and that it is received. So we're made for communion. It's chiseled in our bones. It's chiseled in our hearts, our psychology. We're made for it. And when we don't have communion, first with God, there is a deep pain. There's a deep suffering. And we are living in arguably one of the craziest times for dating and relationships. I mean, I didn't live thousands of years ago, so I don't know exactly the scene back then. I know there's always been issues, but we're living in some messy times when it comes to dating and relationships, because Adam knew his wife Eve. That's how they describe the marital embrace, knowledge, this intimate knowledge. Our culture has flipped it upside down. So if you imagine the beginning, Adam and Eve, they got to get to know one another, their stories, and then they made a decision. I know you well enough to where I can commit my life to you. What's happening in the so-called hookup culture is I'll sleep with you without even knowing you, and then perhaps I'll start to get to know you. One of my friends, she went to college when she was 18 years old, and it was a crazy party school. And she wasn't really practicing her faith that much. And one day in her dorm room, her freshman year, she went to bed. And a few moments later, the door opens, and at night she sees her roommate, who's a woman, come back with a guy. And she just acted like she was asleep. The next day comes, the guy wakes up, and he leaves the dorm room. And my friend said to her, "Who was that guy? What's his name?" And she responded, "I don't know his name. I don't know him." And she immediately jolted in her heart. And she actually told me after that experience, she left that college. She left that culture because she knew there was something up. And our culture does a great job at glamorizing and making this hookup culture and the pornographic look enticing to us. But it's robbing us for the capacity to be known and to know. It's robbing us of true intimacy and true relationships. And I joined a fraternity in my college, and some of you have heard my talks, but I often share this story of when I was gathered around this group of guys, and one of the guys said, "Hey guys, so how many people have you slept with? You know, what's your body count?" And we get that, I'm seeing that so much on social media, this talk about body count. And my friend who was in the fraternity, he wasn't religious at all. And he just said, "Can I rephrase that question? Let's just make it more accurate. How many people have you treated like a piece of meat?" And I was just like, what did he just say? He's like, yeah, let's look at the reality. Let's take the mask off. We're treating people like mere objects for one's own selfish gratification. The only value that people have in today's culture, and the hookup culture, I should say, is the value of body parts, which is greater than the person. That's what our culture is holding out. But we know this instinctively, particularly women, I want to say, is if you're seeing a guy or dating a guy who in his mind or his heart is your value is how much your body parts entice my lust, he will leave once there are quote unquote greater or better that entices his lust. And we know this instinctively. And women feel the pressure. I'm seeing this a lot. They feel the pressure. I have to be perfectly beautiful. I have to weigh 120 pounds. I have to have this color hair, because that's what the culture is saying men want. And if I'm not this, I'm unlovable, I'm not wanted, I'm not desired. And these are lies. These are lies from the evil one. We have to look first to our Heavenly Father, that we are beloved, that we are enough right where we are. And we're just wounded in this area so much. We've literally gone from, I remember my parents when I was a little kid, "Don't talk to strangers, Brendan, don't talk to strangers," to, hey, if you want to expose your body to strangers, if you want to sleep around with strangers, you can do that. We have totally flip side what we are made for, and we are feeling the effects of this. And one of the greatest ways our culture teaches us to look at one another or look at the body and not see it is the exposure of pornography and the growth of that. Every single one of us at some level has been exposed or influenced by this. And John Paul II brilliantly says, and you probably have heard this so many times because it's such a famous quote, the problem of pornography is not that it shows too much, it shows far too little, because you don't see the person in their story. There was one woman who was in this industry, and she just said, everyone's on drugs, everyone's suicidal, because they just can't stand the way they've been treated. And we know this. As St. Augustine, I want to be known and I want to know. There has been a rise, not in just or a decline, not just in the marriage rate, but women in recorded history. It is the highest ever in recorded history where women who are 30 years old do not have children. Then there are women who have children. The first time ever in recorded history. And I've talked to some women, and some would say, you know, all the guys were messing around in their 20s and not committing, so I'm gonna just do that. But then they find themselves 30, 32, 35, and they're beginning to see, oh my gosh, it almost like it clicks in their heart. What was I doing before? I want to be married and have a family. But our culture pushes back at that. I had a friend who literally, I had coffee with them, and she said, Brendan, I don't know how to live in today's culture. And I was like, what's going on? And she's like, I was just with friends from high school, and they're not faithful anymore. They're not Christian. And I'm Catholic, and I want to be a mom and have kids and truly live the faith. And she said, I went to have dinner with a group of my girlfriends. And there were some guys there too, and all the guys and girls started to talk about how they don't want any kids. They don't want any kids because it's just a burdensome to their freedom. And she spoke out and she said, you know, I want to be a mom. I want to have a family. I want to have kids. And she said, no joke, that one of her friends, I don't think it was a true friend, said to her, You're a disgrace to the women of this generation. I was like, what'd you do then? Did you punch her or something? What? There's the media pushing women in order to be free. You have to sterilize yourself because the burden of fertility is enslaving you. That's the message of the radical feminist movement. And I'm telling you this, we are all so influenced by this. Sadly, we can't escape it. And so we grew up in this generation. And it's our goal we have to fight it. We can't just run away from it, because I have tendencies in my heart. I just want to run away. I just want to run away from all this. But we have to intentionally live in it. Because deep down, we know what we're made for. And when I encountered the theology of the body, and those that have heard the story, please bear with me because I just share it all the time, is my eyes were opened. That's ultimately why I'm here today. It's because I did a course with the Theology of the Body Institute with Christopher West, and he just brought to light, particularly the woman is the most beautiful of all creation. She is the tipping point, the grand finale. And we know this. I mean, if you go to a wedding, you're sitting down while the guy's up on front of the altar. It's the guy, he's stiff, he's just a dude. No one's really caring that much. But then what happens? The music turns on and the woman begins to walk down. Everyone stands up. She's the crown. What happens on their first dance? No one's looking at the guy. He's stiff, right? It's his job to make her shine. All right. So I remember, and I was seeing this. I remember Christopher West was bringing the dignity of woman to light, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I was seeing images of God. God gave me a grace. And I began to tell people. And if I was on a train or a plane, if anywhere, I was telling people their dignity, or I was trying to. And one woman I was taking an Uber with, she asked me, where are you headed? And I was like, I'm headed to the train station. I'm getting my studies in a teaching called Theology of the Body. She's like, Theology of the Body? I've never heard of that. And I asked her if she was religious at all or had a faith, and she's like, no, I'm agnostic, no faith. So I asked her a question. What do you think the world would be like if we looked at one another the way in which we look at a sunset? Because the theology of the body reveals you, the human person, is the crown of all creation. What would the world be like? And she was just like, oh my gosh. Everything would be so different. And I usually share that story, and I shared it to some college students at Washington State University. And a year later, one of my friends who was at my talk came up to me. He said, Brendan, that changed my life. What if we look at one another like a sunset? I have a story I'd like to tell you, Brendan. And I was like, let me hear it. It's like one day, me and some of the law students, we went out to a bar after class, and we had a couple drinks, but it was getting late and dark out, and one of the ladies said, Ken, could you walk me home? It's late, it's dark out, I don't want to walk alone. Could you walk me home? And sure, I'll walk you home. So they get to the doorstep, and he tells her good night. And she said, hey, Ken, would you like to come inside with me to have some tea? And he was thinking, what does she want? It's late. Couple drinks, but he thought tea sounded great and warm, and so he went inside. And he said, Brendan, right when I went inside, I remembered what you told me. What if we look at one another like a sunset? And I tried to do that with this girl. And so, no joke, she's having tea right here, he's having tea, and he's just trying to gaze at her as the crown. And she is taken off by this guy, like, what is going on? And says to him, Ken, what is your gaze all about? It is like you're looking into my soul. What is that all about? And he says to her, what if we look at one another the way in which we look at a sunset? And she paused and didn't say anything. She began to cry. She began to cry. And we need We need to cry over and over. We need to get on our knees over and over and fall down over and over, maybe because until we learn what we're made for. Because I don't know about you, you might know that. I'll just say to ladies, you might know that, okay, I'm meant to be seen. I want to be seen. I want to be seen. I want to be known and loved. I know I'm made for that. But perhaps how you operate, perhaps how I operate every day is I don't truly believe that that is real. And so I have to look this way. I have to work out this much, and then I'll be lovable. And it is so tiring. It's so tiring. And we need someone. We need a friend. We need Jesus. You're enough right where you are. That love you long for, you're made for it. And I'm so sorry that it hasn't been given, that it's been taken. And we have to get on our knees again and again to be reminded of that truth constantly. And I usually share, some of these stories about what we're made for to some high schoolers, but they'll always say, okay, I get it. I get pornography, the hookup culture is robbing us of this capacity to be known and to know reality. It's robbing us of real love. But what if I love my girlfriend a lot? It's just, I want to do stuff, and I think it's true love, I love them, they love me. Well, they ask how far is too far. And if you're asking that question, you're in the wrong ball game, I'll just say. Because I kind of got slapped on the wrist. I learned it the hard way. I was dating a girl sophomore year in high school. I wouldn't consider that even dating, but let's go with it. So I was dating this girl in high school, and we would say that we loved each other. It was more obsession that I realized. And whenever we went to her house, her parents would say, all right, you two, if you're going upstairs to watch a movie or something, that door has got to be wide open. It's got to be wide open. And we were like, okay. So one day, we thought it would be a good idea to shut the door. So we shut the door. And we start kissing, start messing around, and all of a sudden the door flings open and her mom comes in, and she said, I was gonna tell you two that I'm going off to the grocery store just for a few moments and I'll be back, but guess what? You two are coming to the grocery store with me now. So we go to the grocery store, and I'm just shame and oh no, oh my gosh, what if her father hears about this? So a few days later, I get a text message from my girlfriend. Hey Brendan, my dad wants to talk to you. Really? Yep, he wants to see you right now. And so I'm 15 years old. I can't even drive myself to see her father, so my mother drives me to the house. And I go to his house, and we sit down on the couch, and he has his shotgun right next to him. No, I'm kidding. That's a joke. He does not. So we have this discussion. He looks at me, he says, Brendan, I just want you to respect the rules of our household. And I'm just listening and listening. He says, Brendan, that's my baby girl. That's my daughter. And he started crying. Now I knew this as a sophomore in high school. Why was I so ashamed or afraid or hiding from the man who loves her the most? Why wasn't I open about my relationship or what we were doing? It's because I knew deep down that what we were participating in, it wasn't authentic love. It was use. I treat another person as an instrument for my own selfishness. How far is too far? Some people might say, making out's too far, you only can kiss. Guess what could be too far? You looking at someone on the sidewalk, you holding their hands. Because if you're in it for simply lust or your own selfish pleasure, that's too far. It is all about the heart. It is all about what are the intentions of my heart? You know, we just recently did a poll on Instagram, was like, can you kiss someone before you are official? Or can you, is that, can you not? The question is always, what does a kiss express? And why are you about to kiss them? Is it simply because, oh, it feel good and it's fun, I just kind of want to? Or is this true expression of a commitment, a deep care for them? It all has to do with the fart about that question. What we should ask is not how far is too far, but rather, is this thought, is this action, is the way I'm talking to my friends upholding the dignity and honoring this person? That is the question of chastity. Because chastity isn't a no, it is a yes to love rightly in and through our sexuality. It's freeing. It's not a closing of our eyes, but it's a widening of our eyes to see the whole person. Because if we knew every single person, I once heard, we would utterly weep. We would get down on our knees in reverence towards each person if we truly knew one another. And that should shape our romantic relationships. That should shape everything. John Paul II says this, and he targets men in particular, but this is for both men and women. Do everything to recognize that gift which she is for you. Fear only one thing, that you try to appropriate that gift. That is what you should fear. As long as she remains a gift from God himself to you, you can safely rejoice in all that she is as that gift. Perhaps God wills that it be you who is the one who tells her of her inestimable worth and special beauty. If that is the case, do not be afraid. Lord, help us to see the other as gift. Help us to see the body, sexuality, as a beautiful gift, as something sacred. Because all the church's teachings about you can't do this, you can't do this, save yourself until married, or why mom and dad said cover your eyes when you were watching a TV show with them and something came on. Why dress modestly? The church always comes down to this, because the human body and human sexuality is so good, so beautiful, with such dignity, that you should only give of yourself, that you should only open of yourself to a person that will literally say to you, if you expose yourself to me in this way, in this vulnerable way, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. In other words, marriage. That is why the church says, wait until you're married. It's like, oh my gosh, that makes complete sense now. It is a yes to love rightly. So those are some physical boundaries. What about emotional boundaries or emotional chastity? We often hear, guys struggle with physical chastity, ladies struggle with emotional chastity. Guess what? We both struggle with both, okay? There might be a tendency, guys might struggle more with physical chastity. There might be a tendency, but we're all unique and we all have our different struggles. But there is maybe a tendency for women more emotionally. What are some boundaries with that? Well, I had a friend when I was a campus minister at Washington State. He came up to me, he said, Brendan. I was like, yeah, dude, you're excited. What's going on? He's like, I like this girl and she likes me a lot. I was like, oh, really? And he told me about who she is. And I was like, have you told her? He's like, no, I haven't told her I liked her yet. We just kind of know. Like, she goes on long walks with me. She stays up late on the phone with me. And we've been doing this for 2 months. I was like, dude, if you don't tell her, you're going to get crushed. Like, you got to tell her. You got to give clarity. Define the relationship type of deal, And so a few days later, he comes back to me crying. He says, I told her I liked her. And she said, I thought we were friends this whole time. I've had this done to me. Where, the question, should you be going on long walks if you're not interested in them all the time? Should you be up late talking? No. Because at some point, goes to the question, can guys and girls be friends? In some sense, yes. But in another sense, no. If there's a lot of intimate conversations for a long time, one will be interested. That has been every person that I have talked to. Can guys and girls be friends? No, yes and no, okay? I think you guys know what I'm trying to say here. But we have to be protective, ultimately, of one another's minds. Also, even fantasy. It's what he brought in his mind is probably, we're going to get married. She's in love with me. When in fact, she's thinking, we're friends. Emotional chastity is to live in reality on both sides. I'm going to treat this person where we're at, and that's friends. Or, no, I'm interested, so I'm going to treat him in that way. Same with him. He needs to be operating not in fantasy, in great clarity. Right? So we need to be attentive of that as well. Because we've all been hurt. We've all been hurt, and hopefully, God willing, we can learn from our mistakes and wounds. But, the last thing I want to conclude with is I want to ask yourself, do you feel like, if you're single, I know there's some people who might be parents on here who might want to talk with their kids about this stuff, but a great question to ask yourself if you're single or even dating is like, am I really ready? Am I really ready? Because a lot of times in my dating experiences, I made the woman my God, who I thought could give me the deepest desires of my heart, satisfy me, make me happy, give me my identity. And there got to a point a few years back where I went to counseling because I was feeling very bitter and resentful. And we began to uncover my story, and I've had a lot of rejections, which I'm going to share kind of in the next session. But he said, Brendan, I asked him, I said, when I'm in a relationship, I'm really happy and I'm doing great. And when I'm not, I'm doing terrible. What's your thoughts on that? And one part of him was like, maybe this could be a sign, pray into it of maybe you are called to marriage. And maybe, that is a good thing. When you're in a relationship and you're happy, that's a good thing. He's like, but also, Brennan, based off of your story, you've been rejected a lot, and perhaps that you're trying to look for the woman to fill your woundedness. And he's like, can I be honest with you, man? He says to me, can I say something very clear to you? I was like, yeah, you can tell me anything. He said, all right, Brendan, if you're called to marriage, it would not be okay to enter marriage as an insecure boy looking for the woman to fill your wounds. He's like, no. You are made to be a secure man who knows his identity as a beloved son of the Father. And in that security of knowing you are beloved, you can then freely give of yourself. And I was like, yes, like preach it, like, yeah. Like he called me out, but he called me out onto what I'm made for and the freedom that I'm made for. The question we should be asking is not, who's the person that I want, the type of person I want. The question is, for me as a man, how can I be a good man for what women deserve? Women, you should be asking, how can I conform to be like Mary, who is the model of femininity, to what a man deserves? Because Jesus one time very clearly told me this in a prayer experience in Calcutta, India. I was in this prayer experience. It was one of the most powerful I've ever had. And we're sitting up on a hill overlooking a city, and I'm 21 years old at the time, and he's also 21, and he's got his arm around me. He's like, Brendan, do you want to learn how to love a woman rightly? I was like, yes, yes, yes. Then you have to first give yourself entirely to me, because that I will be in you, and I'll be the one loving her through you. For my love is far greater than yours. We first have to give ourselves first entirely to Jesus. Perfect love. So that perfect love can emanate in and through our bodies to touch the other. That's healing. That's redemption. And so I want to conclude with that. Maybe reflect on where you're at. Maybe you're discerning dating or dating someone right now. Have you put a lot of your security and identity of who you are in that person? Or are you secure first as beloved son or daughter? Because that is the first thing.